So, good morning, friends and students. I'm going to, there we go. We're going to begin with a little bit of recitation of prayers, but, think, as I've mentioned before, when you say these prayers, try to think of the meaning. So when we think of, when we just say the words, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, you have to remember what the causes of refuge are. What does it mean to go for refuge? It's not just merely saying, something to please the Buddha or something like that. It means having the cause of some concern, fear, if you want, of future suffering and present suffering. And recognizing that the objects of refuge, the triple gem, have the ability to protect you from that suffering. And then when we say, through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all migrating beings or all beings. That is the production of bodhicitta, and you have to remember what that means, because we're doing it for the sake of mother sentient beings, having developed compassion and enhancing that to the point where we have the wish to achieve enlightenment so that we can perfectly do that. May we become a Buddha. So anyway, with that said, let's recite this. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, the collections being the collection of merit and the collection of wisdom, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit each and every migrating being. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the merits, through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. So the Buddha is the teacher. The Dharma is that which he taught, which we try to realize, and the Sangha are our fellow aspirants, practitioners who, some of them are more advanced than we, some of them are our peers, some of them we might act as the inspiration to practice. Anyway, the Sangha is like the nurses that help us take the medicine of the Dharma. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Then offering a short mandala, in a sense, this is very profound. It's said to be the condensation of all of the methods of purification and creating the creation of merit. So you imagine your house, your body, the whole universe, anything that you can perceive and imagine, and offer that part of it that you hold as yours, to the Buddha, to the gurus. By offering this ground anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, in other words, you imagine it as even your room as having been swept and, aerated, and offering of flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon, visualized as a Buddha realm. So this visualization means that you try to overcome your ordinary conception of the universe as being some dark place with, asteroids flying by and dangerous things and aliens and so forth, transformed into a pure realm May all migrators enjoy such a pure realm. And then requesting the omniscient mind, O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom. So when we say Dharmakaya, the Buddha's omniscient mind is like a vast sky because its nature is empty of inherent existence. And by by understanding the needs of the disciples from that omniscient mind, which is like a vast sky, the Buddha can manifest the teachings like rain falling down. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, so the compassion is what motivates, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma. So the vast means teaching about the conventional truth, bodhicitta and so forth, karma, and the profound means the realization of emptiness, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Radna Mandalakam Niryatayam Hi. Okay. So we are going to meditate just for a short time. And although we've set a motivation with those words, we're going to try to enhance that now with calming the mind, letting go of other thoughts in your mind so you can focus just on the teachings. So sit comfortably. Recognize your breath. Same way that you can recognize your heart beating if you focus really, really closely. You don't have to control the breath, just watch it. Once you've recognized it, hold it in mind with the mental factor of mindfulness. Some wisdom aspects still. Recognize when you're breathing in, when it's changing direction, and when you're breathing out. If you notice yourself attending to other thoughts or to what's within your range of your eyes and so forth, or your feelings of your body, recognize those are just appearing to your mind and take your attention away from them. Focus it, invest that energy back into the mindfulness of the breathing. So having calmed competing thoughts, kind of like I don't know, all of you know, like roller derby, sort of like skating around a rink. All these other people are around you, jostling you, you're paying attention to them. Now they've been all knocked off. You're just skating around by yourself. Now bring your attention to your mental consciousness rather than the breathing. Actually, what you're bringing your attention to is a mental image of the clear light nature of your mind, having recognized the contents as though they were clouds within the spaciousness, the space-like quality of your mind, clear light nature of your mind. That, like ordinary space, lacks, in the way that ordinary space lacks obstructive contact, the mind also lacks any obstruction to the arisal or removal of objects of mind. I like to say it like it has no viscosity. If you're angry, that anger can go in an instant, unlike a fly caught in honey. Suddenly, if the fly were to recognize, it's free to leave. Without fear, dive into that spaciousness of your mind with your whole endeavor, like the meaning of a daka or dakini. You know, in Tibetan we say khandro or khandroma, someone who progresses through this space, not just like the mythological drawings of dakas and dakinis flying through space, but their inner world is one in which they travel in the non-conceptual sphere of their own minds. We all have this Buddha potential, this conventional clear light nature of the mind, the developmental Buddha nature. Like my second grade teacher said, oh, you know, aim high, you can do it. There's nothing that prevents us from developing detachment from the world and all the worries of the world. There's nothing that prevents us from realizing compassion for others, bodhicitta, wisdom that realizes emptiness. The only thing that prevents us is our own fear. I think that the opportunity to recognize this potential of my mind right now is due to the fact that I have a life of leisure and endowment. This auspicious moment, as the Buddha called it, so rare and so valuable, so meaningful, because with this moment, rather than getting caught up with the icky-picky, teeny-weeny worries of this life, we can start to see the great banquet of possibilities that we can use this life for. to find real satisfaction for ourselves, to go beyond that and be no longer a burden to others, no longer harmful to them, no longer clinging to them if we are attached. We can be like the fool of the tarot cards. Other people might not recognize us as a spiritual aspirant, but we can be working for the benefit all the time, having developed an empathy for them, recognizing them as having been our mothers in numberless lives in the past. And even beyond that, recognizing that we are exactly equal with them and not wanting to be suffering, and wanting to be free of suffering, wanting to have happiness. There's no reason that we can't identify ourselves with the entirety of sentient beings once we've had an understanding of emptiness. There's no inherently existent person the way that we imagine ourselves now. That we can think of me as the entirety of sentient beings. When they suffer, when they have problems, it's just as unbearable as when we have problems now in our basic baby state now. To benefit them, to lead them out of suffering into stable happiness, we have to have achieved that state ourselves. We have to achieve the state of omniscience, of Buddhahood. To do that, we have to accumulate wisdom and merit. We have to have a collection of merit and wisdom. So think, I'm going to participate in the class today. Kind of a double whammy. I'm by motivating that I'm going to listen in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. That motivation creates incredible store of merit and wisdom. And the material that we're going to be talking about is not how to make a better souffle or how to fix your car, but to understand the stages of the path, how the Buddha achieved enlightenment by passing through the bhumis. I'm going to participate this morning, this afternoon, this evening, in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And then bring your attention back to the present. Welcome, friends. Hi, Mikhail, Diana. You guys have shown up. Rachel, Jennifer. Mintu is here again. Ida, hi, Ida. And Paul, there's Paul. Oh, Stephen's here. Okay, good. Don, Richard. A couple of people are us. Shanka, Brother Shanka has some project for his software company that he has to have for Apple Computer. So he said he'll listen later. And a couple of other people sent emails that they're busy with other things. And Anna Lacroix. Hi, Anna. So before we begin, anyone have a question that they've been eager to answer, or to, some doubt about the previous class? No? Stephen, you all caught up? Yeah. Okay, good.
Venerable George, I did have a question now that you mention it, if you don't mind.
Okay, I'm glad I mentioned it. Okay.
It has to do with Pratyeka Buddhas who arise from the Buddha's speech, so solitary realizers. But how does that happen?
Right.
Because I understood them to sort of be in a realm or an age or a world system where there were no Buddhas. So how did they hear the Buddha's speech?
Well, no, they they have a strong aspiration to achieve their enlightenment, their bodhi. And remember, the word enlightenment was sometimes we misunderstand it mean only the enlightenment of a Buddha, but we also call the nirvana of the hearers and solitary realizers their enlightenment, right? Their respective enlightenments. There's lesser enlightenments. There's the enlightenment of the Shravaka, the enlightenment of the Pratyeka Buddha, and the enlightenment of the Bodhisattvas, which means Buddhahood. So they may have a strong aspiration that in their final lifetime, they will manifest that by themselves alone, without the appearance of a universal teacher. That's one of their motivations. I've jokingly made an analogy about the old commercial on TV about the young housewife and her mother or mother-in-law is in the kitchen and telling her how to wash the dishes, and she says, "Mother, please, I'd rather do it myself." Maybe a little bit like that attitude. But they have, so they do listen to teachings of the Buddha when they're beginning and in the middle and near the end, but in their final life, they want to manifest their own nirvana without the appearance of a universal teacher. And so as we mentioned several times, the story of Shakyamuni coming and from the Tushita heaven, and before he descended, he sent down some of the bodhisattvas that were there to tell any Pratyeka Buddhas that might be present in the world, because there had not been a universal teacher just before him, right? There had been a long period since the previous Buddha appeared in the world. So there were some Pratyeka Buddhas present, and the bodhisattvas came down to tell them, skedaddle. Do you know that Americanism? Skedaddle, and leave, because the universal teacher is coming. And one of the names of Deer Park, where the Buddha first turned the wheel of Dharma, is Rishipatana. So there were some rishis there, some seers, some Pratyeka Buddhas that were there. And when they heard that a universal teacher was coming, they figured it was time to achieve their nirvana. So they rose in the air with their psychic powers and consumed their own bodies with the fire element, and their ashes fell onto that land. And so patana means falling. So Rishi Patana means the falling of the ashes of the rishis. So that there were some there. And when they heard that the Buddha, that a universal teacher was coming, they left. Does that help? Okay. So anyone else have a question? Ida.
Well, it's just a thought or rhetorical question, I guess. But imagining the nirvana of the solitary realizers and hearers, I can't imagine actually how it could be when they still have obstructions like a self-cherishing thought, or the appearance of phenomena as inherently existent. So what kind of nirvana is that?
Oh, okay. So two things. So let's do the second one first. We're going to enter in today explaining the thought of the Buddha from, say, the Dashabhumika Sutra, the Sutra of the 10 Bhumis, right? Where it says that there's implication from that that it's impossible to achieve nirvana unless you realize emptiness. So we will see as we go along that those Pratika Buddhas, the Shravakas, do realize emptiness, not just the selfless, gross selflessness of persons, as in their own tenet systems, and as even in some of the Madhyamaka systems, below the Prasangika, they say, oh, it's possible to achieve nirvana by just realizing the selflessness of persons as is posited by those lower schools, just the lack of a self-supporting, substantially existent person. But Chandrakirti points out that the Buddha himself taught in the Ten Bhumi Sutra and in other sutras, the questions of Maitreya and so forth, that it's impossible to achieve nirvana without realizing emptiness. So that's one thing. And whether they have the self-cherishing attitude, Ran Chenzingi Lo, maybe they don't have the self-cherishing attitude any longer, but they still have what is called the desire to achieve liberation for oneself alone. Slightly different. Sister Nadine and I had corresponded a little bit about what's meant by self-cherishing. So self-cherishing is an obstacle to developing bodhicitta at the beginning. But what is self-cherishing? Self-cherishing is a mind. It's not just an imprint. It's an actual active mind that considers oneself more important than others. And it's one of the big obstacles the Bodhisattvas, it's the main thing the Bodhisattvas take as their obstacle at the beginning, rather than the obstacle of self-grasping, which is essentially, self-grasping is essentially the ignorance that doesn't understand emptiness, right? So rather than that, they take as their main object to be eliminated at the beginning, self-cherishing, cherishing oneself more than others. And so they have to, that requires a lot of, development of merit and meditation and so forth. So it's said that it's a point of debate, but it's said that when, like we've mentioned before also in this class and in some other classes, that the bodhisattvas don't completely eliminate self-cherishing until the 8th bhumi. Do you remember that? So in the 8th bhumi, they are equivalent to the hearers and solitary realizers, arhats. They are like Mahayana arhats, but they are different than the Hinayana arhats in that, say both of them have eliminated self-cherishing, which is a mind which is cherishes themselves more than others. But the Hinayana arhats still have a continuum of the desire to leave cyclic existence by themselves alone. They want to enter into nirvana for themselves alone. So it's a subtle point, but maybe some of you will be able to think about that. Paul, have you heard some discourses about that?
I'm not sure. It sounds vaguely familiar, but I'm not remembering.
Okay, so you can go back and look through your encyclopedic mind and see if you can find that. Okay, does that help a little, Ida? Okay. Anyone else have a question? Okay.
Is that true that basically for the arhat, their main object of contemplation is the removal of the affliction or the suffering that bothers your mind, like whatever affliction that we have tend to come from ourselves. So if you just remove the attachment to ourselves, then you have no more afflictions.
Yeah. The teachings of the Four Noble Truths that the Buddha first taught in Deer Park in Rishipatana, where the Pratika Buddhas burned themselves up into ashes. So that first turning of the wheel is understood in the Hinayana to be, when we talk about suffering and the origin of suffering, the second truth, origin of suffering. Origin of suffering is what, Mintu?
Origin of suffering is ignorance and attachment.
No, it's karma and klesha, right?
Okay, I see.
Karma and klesha. So, in the Hinayana system, they say the main klesha is attachment. In the Mahayana, we say that that's not quite right. The main klesha is grasping to the inherent existence of phenomena, of the self and of phenomena. Okay, so from the Hinayana point of view, they want to reach cessation of suffering, the third noble truth, and in order to do that, they practice the path, the true path, the fourth noble truth, which is meditation. They take their main meditation as the meditation on the selflessness of the person, right? They think that they will reach nirvana that way. But in the Mahayana, we say that the bodhisattvas, even before that, recognizing the defects of self-cherishing, the advantages of cherishing others, they develop great compassion and bodhicitta, and they take that as their main sort of highway for some time, developing bodhicitta with the goal of realizing emptiness directly. Some of the sharp facultied bodhisattvas, right from the very beginning, have a realization of emptiness, not direct realization, just a inferential understanding of it, and that enhances their development of bodhicitta. And so the Hinayana arhats, or the hearers and solitary realizers, before they're arhats, of course, before they're even aryas, they take as their main goal to eliminate what you call detachment, which we might call, the grasping to the self, in order to escape from cyclic existence for themselves alone, because they still have self-cherishing. Their self-cherishing hasn't been eroded by developing the bodhisattva practices of seeing the disadvantages of self-cherishing and the advantages of cherishing others. They see that as too long a task. Only some exceptional people like, quote, the Buddha did that, right? They called the Buddha the bodhisattva, with air quotes. They don't see the bodhisattva path as something that they want to enter into. They want to get out of the fire of cyclic existence as quickly as possible. Okay.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. If
Okay,
you,
I'm glad. Okay.
yeah, if you're on a given day, you think that, yeah, like infinite sentient beings, I don't have time for that. I just want to get out. Of this
Right. There's I've mentioned this song from when I was in college. We've got to get out of this place if it's the last thing we ever do. Remember that one? Maybe not. That's a little bit more like the Mahayana. We've got to get out of this place. The Hinayana song would be, I've got to get out of this place. This place meaning samsara. Okay, so let's leave it there. So let's continue with class. Some good questions. Just to remind you where we were, last time we were talking about these quotations about that were from the biography or the life story of Maitreya Sutra, and was that on the first ground, the bodhisattva outshines, surpasses the hearers and solitary realizers by means of his lineage. He's entered into he or she has entered into the Mahayana lineage. And then there was a qualm about if that were the case, don't the bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation and preparation also outshine the hearers and solitary realizers? And the analogy that was given in the sutra was that, yes, indeed, even though they don't have the diamond-like quality of a bodhisattva on the first bhumi, it's kind of like a sliver of that. Even if there's a sliver of a diamond, the diamond is not yet huge. Just a little teeny piece of it still outshines, surpasses the hearers and solitary realizers. But there's a particular brilliance or outshining of the hearers and solitary realizers on the first bhumi. Remember, the first bhumi means they've already passed through the path of accumulation, the path of preparation. Now they've had a direct realization of emptiness, not just an inferential understanding of it. And because of that, they've entered into the lineage of the Buddha. They have this immense joy. The first ground is called the joyous one, or, great joy. And because of that, those qualities, they outshine the hearers and solitary realizers. But even before that, with the analogy of the fraction, a piece of the diamond outshining other ornaments, even before that, they outshine the hearers and solitary realizers. Okay, so that's where we'd gotten up to before. Everyone comfortable with that? Rachel, you there? Yeah, okay. Rachel has used one of those features I use sometime. She's got the background fuzzy. You see that? Okay, so now we're going to go on the seventh ground. This is page 77 of your text. I was able, with encouragement from some of you, I put down the page number. How on the seventh ground, Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas, hearers and solitary realizers, are outshone by means of the Bodhisattva's intelligence. So how on the seventh ground, the Bodhisattvas outshine and surpass the hearers and solitary realizers, not only by their merit, by their lineage, but they outshine them by their wisdom. Okay, and so this is the next line there. When gone afar, he will also surpass them by his intelligence. That's one line, the last line of verse 8 from the Madhyamaka Karakas, right? So, the Karakas were just the verses, and the Bhasham that Chandrakirti wrote, the auto commentary to those, is what Lama Tsongkhapa is paraphrasing here. So he says, when the Bodhisattva on the first ground arrives on the ground of gone afar, so when each of the grounds has its own name, like the first ground is, now is called the joyous, or what does Thupten Jinpa call it? What's the first ground called in his book? Who's been reading along?
Perfect joy.
Perfect joy. Okay. Raptu Gawa in Tibetan. So you could take the Raptu as meaning perfect or very, and Gawa means joy. Okay. So when the Bodhisattva on the first ground, on the joyous ground, arrives on the eighth ground, which is called gone afar, the etymology of that will come later, but just to give you a preview, he's completely gone beyond, because on the eighth ground, he is now no longer within cyclic existence, right? On the first seven grounds, even though he's realized emptiness directly, he or she has begun to cease the delusions. It's not until the eighth ground that he's completely free of the delusions. This is essentially equivalent to the Hinayana Arhat. So when when this bodhisattva on the first ground arrives on the ground on the eighth bhumi, the Ganafar, in addition to outshining Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas through his conventional mind, he will also surpass them by means of the power of his intelligence. So I'm mistaken. It's not the eighth ground. It's the seventh ground. Ganafar is the seventh ground, not the eighth ground. Okay. In addition to outshining the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas through his conventional awakening mind, as he did on the first ground, now that bodhisattva on the seventh ground will also surpass them, especially by the power of his intelligence. This is stated in the Dashabhumika Sutra, the Sutra of the 10 Grounds. Okay. Oh, what do we say? Kulaputra, son of the Jinas. Children of the conquerors. It is like this. The son of a king, born into the royal lineage and bearing the name of royalty, because of the king's majesty, outshines the entire assembly of ministers the instant he is born. So remember, the earlier quotation was from the Liberation of Maitreya, talking about outshining the hearers and solitary realizers. Now this is a different quotation from a completely different sutra, the Sutra of the 10 Grounds, but a similar kind of thing. The son of a king born into the royal lineage, the prince, in other words, and bearing the name of royalty, because of the king's majesty, outshines the entire assembly of ministers the instant he is born. So this is like talking about the first Bhumi Bodhisattva. He does not achieve this through his critical acumen. What is it? Critical acumen. The quotation from the on the 84,000 website of the Ten Bhumi Sutra. So this is verse 550 and 551. It says, "O Jina Putras, sons of the Jina, sons of the conqueror. By analogy, when a prince is born into a royal family and is endowed with the characteristics of royalty, he is immediately superior to the ministers because of his royalty, right? This is because of the sovereignty of the king and not because of his own understanding's discernment." I'm just giving you a slightly different translation than Jimpa is saying here. However, when he has become an adult, he transcends the activities of all the ministers through the power of his own intelligence. So it's kind of like when grown up. So this is going to be, this grown-up stage is not, as I erroneously said a little bit earlier, the eighth Bhumi, but when he reaches Ganafar, which is the seventh Bhumi. Which would be interesting, why it's not the eighth Bhumi, why it's the seventh Bhumi. Then the next verse says, likewise, Jinaputra. Jinaputra means sons of the conqueror, children of the conquerors. The Bodhisattva, because of the greater power of his altruistic intention, outshines all the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas the instant he generates the awakening mind, right? As we said before. This is not achieved through his critical acumen by the power of his intelligence. However, the Bodhisattva on the seventh ground, since he abides with the greatness of his knowledge of the relevant object, what that means is debatable. This is the subject of debate in the debating courtyards. However, the Bodhisattva on the seventh ground, since they abide with the greatness of their knowledge of the relevant object, totally exceeds all the works of the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas. So I'll read you Jeffrey Hopkins' translation of that second verse. He says, a bodhisattva outshines hearers and solitary realizers through the generation of his power of intelligence only on the seventh ground, the gone afar and above. On the sixth ground and below, he does not outshine them through his power of intelligence. And so that wasn't part of the quotation. Let's see. Here.
Page 145.
However, a bodhisattva on the seventh ground greatly surpasses all the activities of the hearers and solitary realizers. Here Jimpa says, exceeds all the works. Maybe you can take works as meaning their activities. He greatly surpasses all the activities of the hearers and solitary realizers through abiding in the greatness that is his knowledge of his own sphere. Okay, what does that mean? So Lama Tsongkhapa, so that was a quotation from the Dashabhumika. So Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary is, given that the phrase, quote, the instant he generates the awakening mind, unquote, is being used here in the context of the first ground, right? Remember when we talked about the instant he generates the awakening mind, earlier Lama Tsongkhapa explained how that had to be understood as meaning ultimate awakening mind. That means the not just the awakening mind, not just the bodhicitta on the path of accumulation or path of preparation, but when he enters into the path of seeing on the first ground, he has the ultimate bodhicitta. So the instant he generates the ultimate awakening mind is used here in the context of the first ground. It refers to the awakening mind of pure altruistic intention. So awakening mind of pure altruistic intention, that will be explained also later as indicating ultimate bodhicitta. When we talk about the other kind of bodhicitta, we call the awakening mind of belief or imagination. That means the bodhicitta on the path of accumulation and preparation. Why is it called that? The awakening mind of belief, or another translation, awakening mind of imagination, is because on those levels, on those paths, the path of accumulation, path of preparation, the bodhisattva doesn't have a direct realization of emptiness. He has a belief in that. He has an imagination of that because he or she is realizing it by means of a mental image, an intellectual understanding of that, not a direct realization, I'd say conceptual understanding of that, right? So that's called those are called the awakening minds, or the bodhicitta of belief, or the bodhicitta of imagination. It doesn't mean you're imagining bodhicitta. It means that you don't have the ultimate bodhicitta there, direct realization of emptiness, held by conventional bodhicitta, but you have the conventional bodhicitta holding an imagination of emptiness. Making sense? Okay. Given that the phrase, the instant he generates the awakening mind, is being used here in the context of the first ground, it refers to the awakening mind of pure altruistic intention. So that is different than the awakening mind of belief or imagination. So it is only from the ground gone afar, the seventh bhumi, that the bodhisattva outshines Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas through the power of their own intelligence as well. Okay, and the second bhumi, the third bhumi, fourth, fifth, sixth, they haven't surpassed the intelligence of the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas. It's only on the seventh ground. He does not outshine them through the power of his intelligence on the sixth ground and below that. Okay, so then the phrase exceeding all the activities of the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas means the Bodhisattva outshines these two categories of beings, two categories, the Shravakas and here Pratika Buddhas, through his intelligence. That this is so can be understood on the basis of Chandrakirti's Bhasham, the commentary's summary statement. What does that mean? Hopkins translates that as Chandrakirti's condensed commentary on this shows that, quote, surpassing all the activities of the hearers and solitary realizers means surpassing them through intelligence. And this is referring that this, what Hopkins calls Chandrakirti's condensed commentary. Jinpa said something similar to that. This is what it says in Chandrakirti's commentary. This is from my translation of the Madhyamaka Avatara Bhasham. So this is a commentary to that. He says, Chandrakirti said, one should know, therefore, indeed, only on the gone afar, the seventh ground, onwards, does a bodhisattva also outshine the hearers and solitary realizers due to the generation of the strength of his own intelligence, not on lower grounds. Okay, so that's what Lama Tsongkhapa refers to as the basis of the commentary summary. Sumansh.
Venerable George, so I'm a little surprised in reading this, because what it means is that the wisdom, the discernment abilities, the intelligence of those practitioners in the first turning is quite far, is quite
The intelligence of the disciples and the first turning, did you say?
Well, I mean, those who practice the first turning, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Even though they don't have, even though they don't focus on bodhicitta, their wisdom capabilities, from what is being mentioned over here, goes all the way up to the is at par and with those up to the eighth ground, right? That's my
no. This is talking about. Well, I guess you could say that. There is so what does it mean? So it doesn't mean just when you're a Shravaka or a Pratika Buddha, ordinary being on the path of accumulation or preparation. It's at least an Arya Shravaka who's realized, well, selflessness, from the Prasangika point of view, who've realized emptiness directly, Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas. So on the first ground, the Bodhisattva is an Arya. So he or she outshines the hearers and solitary realizers by means of their lineage, meaning they're of the Mahayana lineage. They're like the son of the emperor, the son of the conqueror. They are of royalty. They have greater merit, and so forth. But it's so from that point on, they don't outshine the hearers and solitary realizers by means of their intelligence. They're both realizing emptiness directly until they reach the seventh ground. And then something special happens. It's not as though there's a deeper understanding of emptiness, but some other factor about their intelligence that we're getting into right now.
Yeah. So my question was that, at some point in time, the Buddha, those who achieve nirvana, right? At some point in time, the Buddha brings them onto the Mahayana path.
Right.
When he brings them onto the Mahayana path, I'm going to guess that they have to start out at the first ground. is that right? In other words, he's going to take them through the first ground.
No, they actually enter into the path of accumulation of the Mahayana. So different. So they're not, although they've realized emptiness, and you might think they're entering in at the level of the first ground. Now, remember the rest of you, Suvansh is thinking the one particular thing. The hearers and solitary realizers who achieved nirvana, they became arhats. They remained in meditation until they died. Their body disintegrates or not. Some of the bodies remain, but anyway, their mind is on single-pointed meditation on emptiness for eons. And the Mahayana would criticize them, saying, you know, that they could have been helping sentient beings during that time. So it's a fault of their wishing to achieve nirvana for themselves alone. So after some time, they are awakened by the Buddhas when their samadhi begins to diminish, because that state of single-pointed concentration on emptiness is an impermanent phenomena. And when it begins to diminish, and the Buddha awakes them and reminds them that they have not achieved even their own goal, their own ultimate goal. They've achieved what they thought was their goal of nirvana, but they haven't achieved the Dharmakaya, which would mean knowing all phenomena of the past, present, and future, all of the other qualities, let alone they haven't achieved the benefit, the aim of others. So the Buddhas encourage them to enter into the Mahayana. How do they enter into the Mahayana? They have to enter into the path of accumulation, because they have not accumulated the merit needed, right? So they can achieve, they don't have bodhicitta yet, so they have to, in fact, they haven't even entered the path of accumulation when the Buddha exhorts them. They haven't developed bodhicitta yet, so they have to accumulate merit. They're not even, let alone the first bhumi, they haven't even entered the path of accumulation yet. The path of Mahayana path of accumulation is entered when they have spontaneous bodhicitta, right? Sumash?
Yes, I'm guessing. Yes.
Yeah. So, so that's a demarcation of entering into the path of accumulation of the Mahayana. They entered into the Hinayana path of accumulation when they had spontaneous renunciation. It was fine. They went through the Hinayana path of preparation, Hinayana path of seeing, and path of meditation, path of no more learning, Hinayana path of no more learning, which meant nirvana. Now, when they're awakened, they have to develop bodhicitta in order to enter into the Mahayana path of accumulation. So they have to take rebirth again with their own volition, not by the force of, throwing karma that doesn't give you any choice, but they take rebirth in cyclic existence, accumulate merit, listen to teachings, contemplate, and so forth, develop bodhicitta. They enter into the Mahayana path of accumulation.
Got it.
In the Mahayana path, one has to abide in the path of accumulation and path of preparation for one countless great eon to accumulate the merit. So because they've already realized emptiness, it may not be a whole eon, great eon, but it takes them a long time on the path of accumulation and preparation. When they've accumulated when they have the bodhicitta and they realize emptiness and they have the appropriate accumulation of merit, they'll enter into the Mahayana path of seeing. You might say there's nothing new to see. They've already realized emptiness, but they didn't have the accompanying accumulation of merit until that point.
Okay. So I think what you're saying is, so first of all, I think you corrected me, yeah, which means that it's not simply at the first ground. The entry goes all the way back, even further to the path of accumulation.
even before that to developing bodhicitta. They haven't developed
Yes.
bodhicitta yet.
Right. But
They-
you know, I mean, I'm just kind of wondering, right? When you meet such a person, then this person will probably be somebody who is, you know, very intelligent, has a lot of wisdom, but in terms of their capacities, I guess their capacities, clearly their bodhicitta is you know, is lesser, but also their capacities, or maybe not their capacities, but their potential, right? So intelligence is high, but there are other things
they
are
have
not as
they have the same potential. Everyone has the same Buddha nature, same potential.
Okay.
What they lack is the empathy for others. They spent incredible effort for some number of lifetimes. It
Right.
could have been even one lifetime, 3 or up to 16 lifetimes to achieve nirvana, but their incredible focus on leaving cyclic existence for themselves alone. So that is an obstacle then to developing bodhicitta. They may have eliminated, as we said at the beginning, they may have eliminated self-cherishing thought, self-cherishing attitude, Ranchen Zengi Lo, but they still have the remnant of their wish to escape cyclic existence for themselves alone. They lack the empathy of thinking of other sentient beings' welfare. So they have to develop that first, develop bodhicitta, enter into the path of accumulation, preparation, and path of seeing, and path of meditation and so forth before they can achieve Buddhahood.
Got it. Venerable Joyce, thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Okay. So, really good questions you guys ask. Okay, good. So, continuing Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary. The phrase exceeding the activities of the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas means the Bodhisattva outshines these two categories of beings through the Bodhisattva's intelligence. That this is so can be understood on the basis of the commentary's summary statement, which I read to you from the it's not much longer than that. I don't know why Lama Tsongkhapa didn't just quote it. In the explanation of what is meant by the power of intelligence, so the Bodhisattva, he or she exceeds, excels, outshines the Bodhisattvas, the hearers and solitary realizers by means of intelligence on the seventh ground. What does that mean? What is meant by the power of intelligence? There is the phrase that they abide with the greatness of their knowledge of the relevant object. Right? We just had that a minute ago. The sutra explains the power of intelligence as abiding in the greatness that is the knowledge of his own sphere. This is Jeffrey's translation. This is the greatness of knowing cessation, the limit of reality, which is the sphere of the Bodhisattva. So let's go back. What is it saying here? So Jimpa says, this is the greatness of the Bodhisattva knowing his relevant object. Jeffrey says, the knowledge of his own sphere rather than his own relevant object, which is cessation, which is the perfect endpoint. Perfect endpoint. What does that mean? So Jeffrey translated it, this is the greatness of knowing cessation, the limit of reality, the sphere of the Bodhisattva. So I like that translation a little bit better. It makes a little more sense. What is there are two things here, cessation and the limit of reality. What Jeffrey is calling the limit of reality, Thupten Jinpa calls perfect endpoint. In Tibetan, this is Yangdakpe Ta. Yangdakpa can mean perfect, like when we say Yangdakpa Zope Sangye, perfectly complete Buddha. Yangdakpa can mean perfect. They both, Jeffrey translates it as limit of reality. So he takes Yangdakpa as meaning reality. Jinpa calls it perfect. He calls it the perfect endpoint. So what does this mean? Yangdakpe Ta, Bhuta Koti, I think in Sanskrit. This is a phrase that's used a lot in the sutras. It's referring to the state of cessation. Because when he said, Jeffrey's translation, this is the greatness of knowing cessation, the limit of reality, the sphere of the bodhisattva. Okay, so some explanation is coming here. So on this point, Thupten Jinpa's translation says, some assert that although there is no difference between the gnosis, the wisdom of those on the sixth ground and below, there's no difference between that gnosis and that of the seventh with respect to their natures. So does the wisdom change? It's still knowing emptiness, right? The wisdom on the sixth ground, on the fifth, fourth, third, second, first ground, the wisdom all are the same in terms of their nature. They're knowing emptiness perfectly. So on this point, some assert that although there is no difference between the gnosis of those on the sixth ground and below, that means down to the first ground, not certainly on the path of preparation or accumulation, because they haven't realized emptiness directly. From the first ground to the sixth ground, there's no difference between the gnosis of those and that of a seventh with respect to their natures. Even on the seventh ground, they still are realizing emptiness. The former, that is from the first to the sixth ground, do not possess the capacity to eliminate the obstructions to knowledge. This is what someone says. This is not Lama Tsongkhapa's position. This is not Chandrakirti's position, not the Buddha's position. Some of the tenet systems say that you begin to cease the obstructions to omniscience at an earlier level, right? According to Prasangika, according to Chandrakirti's system, according to Lama Tsongkhapa's system and Arya Nagarjuna, one doesn't begin to eliminate the obstructions to omniscience until the eighth bhumi, eighth, ninth, and 10th bhumi. We're called the pure bhumis. When you enter into the eighth bhumi, you are a Mahayana arhat, you can say. You've eliminated all of the obstructions to liberation. It's only at that point that you begin to eliminate the obstructions to omniscience, according to our system. So some assert that although there is no difference between the gnosis of those of the sixth ground and below and that on the seventh with respect to their natures, they're all realizing emptiness. The former, first to the sixth, do not possess the capacity to eliminate the obstructions to knowledge, while gnosis of the seventh ground has that capacity. According to Prasangika, that's not that capacity to eliminate the obstructions to omniscience doesn't begin until the next ground, until the eighth ground. This, they assert, makes the difference between outshining and not outshining through intelligence. So Lama, these are three objections. Lama Tsongkhapa is going to demolish them in turn. Second objection. Some maintain that this difference between the seventh ground and the earlier grounds, right? Some maintain that this difference is because from the seventh ground, the bodhisattva is able to enter into meditative concentration through the process of leaping over. Have any of you studied Dzogchen? Someone said. Paul, have you studied Dzogchen? Huh? What is leaping over in Dzogchen?
I don't remember the exact definition. It's part of a two process thing called breakthrough, leaping over and breakthrough.
Breakthrough, leaping over, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So the meaning there in Dzogchen, you may have heard, it has the same Tibetan term, togel. It's not what's meant here in the sutra interpretation. That's Dzogchen is talking about some other kind of meaning of it. It's kind of jumping between levels and so forth. So some maintain that this difference, why on the seventh level, they're going to be able to excel the hearers and solitary realizers by means of intelligence, is because from the seventh ground, the bodhisattva is able to enter into meditative concentration through a process of leaping over. So this will also be demolished in the next couple of paragraphs. Third kind of idea that Lama Tsongkhapa is going to show is wrong. Still, others claim that the bodhisattva outshines Shravakas and Pratikas, Buddhas, through his intelligence, because the gnosis of the seventh ground is manifestly directed toward the irreversible eighth ground. It makes no sense at all. Okay, so these three. So of these, the first position is incorrect. It's not saying that only that first is incorrect. Maybe you can read it together. Is incorrect because in this tradition of Chandrakirti, Prajnanika system, it is maintained that all instances of grasping at self-existence of persons are forms of afflicted ignorance. And to eliminate this ignorance so that it cannot resurface, its seeds must be exhausted as well. Right? What was that first position? The first position was that the seventh ground is special because the earlier grounds don't possess the capacity to eliminate the obstructions to omniscience, which Prajnanika says this doesn't take place until the eighth ground. So Lama Tsongkhapa is saying the first position is wrong because in Prajnatika, it is maintained that all instances of grasping at self-existence of persons are forms of afflicted ignorance. What does afflicted ignorance mean? Is there a non-afflicted ignorance? Now, is there a non-afflicted ignorance?
I'm not sure.
Mikhail, have you heard of non-afflicted ignorance before?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I wouldn't define it, but I think so, yeah.
Okay. So in the Hinayana systems, like the Vaibhashika and Svatrantika, what's the difference between an arhat and a Buddha? So the arhats, the Shravakas and Pratika Buddha arhats, have eliminated afflicted ignorance because they've eliminated all the afflictions, right? You say deluded ignorance. But there is a subtler kind of wisdom that the Buddha has that is that has eliminated non-afflicted ignorance. It's a more subtle kind of ignorance. As that's their position. Okay. That's the difference between the arhats and the Buddhas. The arhats have eliminated all of the afflictions, all the delusions. The Buddha has gone beyond that and eliminated something even more subtle that prevents the Buddha from seeing distant objects and distant times and so forth and so on. In their point of view, they don't talk about omniscience. They talk about the elimination of this non-afflicted ignorance. So, for the Prasangika, it is maintained that all instances of grasping at self-existence of persons are forms of afflicted ignorance, and to eliminate this ignorance so that it cannot resurface, so it will not be produced again, the seeds have to be exhausted as well. So that's what we talk about as true cessation. It means not only ceasing the afflictions, the delusions, like anger, attachment, ignorance, and so forth, but ceasing their seeds, exhausting their seeds, right? So right now, we can have instances of not having attachment or anger just by not having an object in front of us that will generate attachment and anger. But we haven't eliminated the seeds of that. The potential to generate anger and attachment and so forth is still within it. So you have to also exhaust the seeds as well. Furthermore, since such elimination of afflictions is common with the two arhats as well, they have eliminated the afflictions as well as their seeds, like the Mahayana arhat. Furthermore, since such elimination of the afflictions is common with the two arhats as well, eliminating the seed of grasping at true existence does not constitute eliminating the obstructions to knowledge. So there are two kinds of obstructions. Obstructions to liberation, which is, all of the delusions and their seeds, all of the afflictions and their seeds, which is basically eliminated by realizing emptiness, eliminating the grasping at true existence and the seeds of grasping at true existence. But realizing that, realizing emptiness and developing cessation that has ceased all of the delusions and their seeds doesn't constitute eliminating the obstructions to knowledge, or you could call the obstructions to omniscience, right? Two kinds of obstructions. Obstructions to what we call liberation, which is the eliminating of all of the delusions, and the obstructions to omniscience, which is a little bit like what the Hinayana calls non-afflicted ignorance. The Buddha has eliminated the non-afflicted ignorance, because even the Hinayana arhats have eliminated the afflicted ignorance. They're completely out of samsara. But the Buddha goes beyond that and having some better kind of wisdom that has eliminated this non-afflicted ignorance. A little bit similar to that. So continuing, as for the obstructions that are in the form of residual imprints, this is what we call bakchak, or we called, what did we just call it? I think we said just called imprints. Obstructions in the form, Jeffrey translates, obstructions in the form of predisposing latencies. So remember we talked about three different things. We talked about the delusions or the afflictions, another way of calling it, klesha. The seeds of those afflictions, of those delusions, the seeds of those klesha, sabon, kind of like a seed that has the potential to grow a sprout. So even though the attachment is not there, if we still have the seed of attachment, when a suitable object arises and you think about it with inappropriately, oh, that's nice, you can develop attachment if you have the seed. There's something more subtle called imprints or bakchak. Jeffrey translates here as predisposing latencies, I think I said, right? What did I say? Predisposing latencies. Thupten Chimpa is translating as residual imprints. So usually we just say imprints, bakchak. As for obscurations that are in the form of bakchak, these things that are not the delusions, not the seeds, but something more subtle, like the smell of the garlic when you've taken the garlic out of the the mortar and pestle. There's still some smell of it. That's like the latency. Okay. As for the obscurations that are in the form of residual imprints, which are distinct from seeds, different than seeds, identified here as obscurations to knowledge, obstructions to omniscience, in other words, their elimination does not occur until the 8th ground. This is what I mentioned earlier. The 8th, 9th, and 10th grounds are called the pure bhumis. On the 7th, at the end of the 7th ground, one has eliminated all of the afflictions. One is essentially, when one enters into the 8th ground, one is essentially a Mahayana Arhat. It's at that point that one begins to eliminate the obstructions to omniscience on the 8th ground. Their elimination does not occur until the 8th ground. Therefore, Chandrakirti's system does not accept the presentation of those schools of thought that maintain that grasping at true existence is an obscuration to knowledge. I'm not sure which systems those are. Some systems say that, that the obstructions to liberation are the grasping to a self-supporting, substantially existent person. Beyond that, the obstructions to omniscience are the grasping to inherent existence of phenomena, or grasping true existence of phenomena. I'm trying to look at Jennifer's face to see if she's following. You following, Jennifer?
Yeah, I think I heard, was that this Svatantrika?
Ah, good. Okay. So of the Madhyamakas, of the Mahayana schools, we talk about Chittamatra and Madhyamaka. Even Madhyamaka has Svatantrika Madhyamaka and Prasangika Madhyamaka. Prasangika Madhyamaka meaning the highest of those Madhyamaka schools. So of the Svatantrikas, there are two kinds. Those who follow the Hinayana, something like the Hinayana Sautrantikas, and those Svatantrikas that are like the Chittamatrans. So of those, some say that it's possible to achieve liberation by realizing the selflessness of persons, which is a lack of a self-supporting, substantially existent person. Okay, and then beyond that, you don't need to get liberation, you don't need to realize emptiness, they would say. To realize emptiness is if you want to achieve omniscience, because they would say that that the obstructions to omniscience include the grasping to inherent existence. So therefore, Chandrakirti's system does not accept the presentation of those schools that Jennifer identified there of thought that maintain that grasping at true existence is an obscuration to knowledge, or obscuration to omniscience, another way of saying it. And on that basis, they elaborate, I say, Chandrakirti's system does not accept that, and on that basis elaborates 9 classes of obstruction to knowledge, obstructions to omniscience, in terms of their strength, weak, medium, and great, which are eliminated on the path of meditation. Oh no, so I missed it. So it's not talking about Chandrakirti's view. They're saying that there are 9 kinds of obstructions to knowledge in terms of their strength, weak, medium, and great. How do you get 9 out of weak, medium, and great? Richard, do you have an idea?
Three in each category?
Weak, weak, medium, weak, great, great, weak, weak, medium, 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 great, medium, like that. So each of them has a weak, medium, and great. So there's 9. So they say that they elaborate 9 classes of obscuration to knowledge, obscurations to omniscience, in terms of their strength, weak, medium, and great, getting 9 categories, which are eliminated on the path of meditation on the second ground and up. Remember, the path of seeing is just the first ground, right? The path of meditation begins on the second ground, second, third, fourth, all the way up to the 10th ground is path of meditation. But they would say that one begins to eliminate some of the Svatantrikas would say that one begins to eliminate the obstructions to omniscience, even on the second ground. Prasangika doesn't accept that. Only on the 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis, 10th grounds, are the obstructions to omniscience eliminated. Then he says, I will explain more about this point below. So those of you who want to read up, it's Thupten Jinpa's note says that in the book, it's pages 239 to 244 of this book that you're reading, that when he's talking about the elimination of the obstructions to omniscience. You can see that it says note 138. You can find that at the end of the book, but just he will explain that later in this book. Okay, so the first point that remember what was the first point? Some assert that although there is no difference between the gnosis on the 6th ground and below and that of the 7th with respect to their natures, the formers do not possess the capacity to eliminate the obstructions to a knowledge, while the gnosis of the 7th ground has that capacity. So Lama Tsongkhapa has explained, Chandrakirti explained how this doesn't hold water in the Prasangika because you don't eliminate the obstructions to omniscience on the 7th ground. So the second position is also incorrect. In the lexicons of archaic Tibetan terms, how does Jeffrey translate that then? So Jeffrey says, the second position, that a bodhisattva gains the ability to leap over certain levels of meditative stabilization on the 7th ground, is also incorrect. Leaping over, or tugel, that I was talking to Paul about before, signifies a disordering of stages. And there is no source showing that such a leap over does not occur in meditative stabilization on the 6th ground and below, but that it only occurs on the 7th, begins to occur on the 7th. There's no source of that. So there are some meditations that the bodhisattvas do engage in called togel, leaping over. And I remember Geshe Zopa used to explain this in detail. One would enter into a certain meditative state and then leap over the next one and go to the 2 above you, and then jump back to 1 below you and back and forth in order to exercise their wisdom, in order to develop, well, in order to exercise their concentration. Okay, so Thupten Jinpa translates it this way. The second position is also incorrect. The second position is that on the 7th ground, they can do this leap over, disordering of stages and so forth. In the lexicons of archaic Tibetan terms, the word for leaping over, tugel, now you might say, that looks like thad bagagel. That's because that's all the Tibetan letters, right? Some of them are silent. So it's pronounced tugel. in the lexicons of archaic Tibetan words, how does Jeffrey translate that? He doesn't translate. It's just saying this is some old Tibetan terms. Leaping over Chogyal is written as jumbled sequence. Ngelshi, which refers to conflation of sequence. Let me see what Jeffrey says there. The second position, that a bodhisattva gains the ability to leap over certain levels of meditative stabilization on the seventh ground, is also incorrect. Leaping over signifies a disordering of stages. Thupten Jinpa calls it jumbled sequence. Disordering of stages, jumbled sequence. Instead of going from one concentration to the next, one jumps over, then jumps back and jumps in between and so forth, in order to exercise concentration, which refers to a conflation of sequence. There is no explanatory basis as to why entering into meditative concentrations through such a leaping over process would not be found on the sixth ground and below, but would be present only on the seventh ground onward. Geshe Zopa used to explain in detail about this, that even on the sixth ground, the fifth ground, the fourth ground, in the first ground, bodhisattvas train their concentration in ways, exercising, they're in maybe the first form absorption. Then they jump to the third form absorption. Generally, to go to the third form absorption, we're talking about the form realm, right? We have the desire realm where we are now, the form realm and the formless realms. Each of those realms, let's say the form realm has four main concentrations, four main levels, which also have subdivisions. In order to go from one to the next, you have to, say to go to the second concentration, you have to attain the first concentration first, and then go to the second concentration, and then go to the third concentration. But when your mind is very familiar with these concentrations, you've developed them before, you can actually go from the first directly to the third, and then go down to the second, and go up to the fourth, and so things like this. That's what's talked about jumbled sequence here. So the bodhisattvas do that, and they do that before the seventh ground. There's no scriptural citation that it only begins on the seventh ground. So that second position is eliminated, we refute it. So the third position is incorrect as well. So Jeffrey puts in the missing words. The third position, that a bodhisattva outshines hearers and solitary realizers through intelligence because the wisdom of the seventh ground approaches the irreversible eighth ground, is also incorrect. Jinpa just says the third position is incorrect as well, because the question of why bodhisattvas on the sixth ground and below do not outshine the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas through their realization, through their intelligence, and why they can do so on the seventh ground is still left unresolved. So what Jeffrey Hopkins says, this still does not eliminate the doubt as to the reason for saying that although bodhisattvas cannot outshine hearers and solitary realizers on the sixth ground and below through their realization, they can outshine them on the seventh ground. So it's not really giving any reason. It's just that it doesn't eliminate the doubt. It's just saying something. So this third explanation amounts to citing the subject of an argument as a proof of its demonstration. Paul, did you read the Tibetan here?
Yeah, I read it like a year ago or 2 years ago when I was proofing this, but yeah.
Okay. So, when you were
I
proofing what?
was the Jimba's translation. I was doing some.
Oh, you were proofing that? Okay. You missed something.
I know, I'm sure.
The third position, so Jeffrey says, this still does not eliminate the doubt as to the reason for saying that it's only on the seventh ground that they can outshine the hearers and solitary realizers. Therefore, this is like making the disputed subject itself into the reason. So basically what it's saying is that you're how do we say it in English? Something like this. You're just stating it as a fact. It doesn't give any reason. Okay. So those three reasons that other Tibetan lamas and other Indians have said why on the seventh ground the bodhisattva outshines the hearers and solitary realizers, but not on the sixth ground and below, they're wrong. So Jayananda, remember this Indian commentator, the only Sanskrit commentary that we have of Madhyamaka Vatara, other than Chandrakirti's self-commentary, auto-commentary, Jayananda's explanation of the commentary, that's what explanation of the commentary means, states that there is exertion on the seventh ground because there still exists the thought, I will enter the path. Yet because the bodhisattva does not engage with signs, such as reading or listening to teachings, such as teachings such as the sutras, he or she has attained the path of signlessness on the seventh ground. In contrast, those on the sixth ground and below, as well as Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas, lack such signlessness. Thus, the Bodhisattva outshines the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas through intelligence on the seventh ground. This is Jayananda's attempt to explain that. If you happen to read some of the other commentaries, I think I mentioned Dzongzar Khyentse Rinpoche gave a oral commentary that was made into a transcript, in that he's talking a little bit, almost like in his tradition, Jayananda's commentary is right. Okay, Lama Tsong Khapa is saying this is wrong. So what does this mean? The explanation, Jayananda's commentary to the Karakas states that there is exertion on the seventh ground because there still exists the thought, I will enter the path. Jeffrey says, in his commentary, Jayananda explains that on the seventh ground, a bodhisattva thinks, I will engage in the paths and therefore exerts himself, but because the signs of doctrine, the signs of the teachings, such as the sutras. So what do we say? The signs of the doctrine. Here, Jimpa says, does not engage with signs. But because the signs of the doctrine, such as sutras, are not manifest in the sense of his not needing to use words of doctrine, he has attained a path of selflessness, of signlessness. So he's saying, Jeffrey's explaining in detail through commentary what Jayananda was thinking, that because on the seventh ground, one no longer has to use words and so forth to understand the doctrine, that he's reached a stage of signlessness. Jayananda explains that since the sixth grounders and below, as well as hearers and solitary realizers, do not have this signlessness, bodhisattvas on the seventh ground outshine them in intelligence. However, the feature of outshining them here appears to be posited in terms of cognition of suchness. So Jimba said, thus the Bodhisattva outshines the Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas through intelligence on the seventh ground. be that as it may, that's where Jeffrey's saying here, however, be that as it may, however, I feel this differentiation has to be associated with the realization of suchness. Jeffrey just says, however, this feature of shining them here appears to be posited in terms of cognition of suchness. You know what suchness means, right? What does suchness mean, Stephen?
Emptiness of phenomena,
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
being inherently existent.
yeah, the way things are really, not the way that they appear. When we say thusness, suchness, they're all synonyms. So this too must be made in terms of entering into and arising out of suchness, the perfect endpoint. Remember, we talked about this before. I said yang dak beta, the limit of reality, Buddha Koti. Jimpo translates it as, what does he translate it here? The perfect endpoint. Jeffrey translated it as the limit of reality. So cessation, true cessation. This too must be made in terms of entering into and arising out of suchness, the perfect endpoint. So what does this mean? On the grounds below the seventh ground, a bodhisattva can enter into meditation on emptiness. So looking at his tea and coffee or whatever the bodhisattva has, meditating, entering into meditation on emptiness below the seventh ground takes some time. Then to arise from that meditation again, instead of opening your eyes, you see everything again, that takes some time. It's not instantaneous. But on the seventh ground and above, the bodhisattva can enter into that meditation on emptiness in an instant and arise from it the next instant. Okay? Follow? Nadine, you following? This too must be made in terms of entering into and rising out of suchness, the perfect endpoint. This is another way of categorizing that meditative equipoise that is directly realizing emptiness. Yang dak beta, the limit of reality. As will be explained below in the chapter on the seventh ground, so later, it is on this ground and above, on the seventh ground and above, that the bodhisattva is able to enter into and arise out of cessation, the perfect endpoint, within each and every moment of cognition. This is not possible on the lower grounds. You can't enter into the meditative equipoise on emptiness, snap, and then enter, and then it's sort of like the bodhisattva on the seventh ground above is able to be, say, looking at you, talking to you, and then even though they seem like nothing has changed, they've entered into meditation on emptiness, direct realization of emptiness, and then come out of that. Remember, until Buddhahood, you cannot see the two levels of truth at the same time, right? See someone nodding. Ida, do you know that? Before Buddhahood, you can't see both levels of truth at the same time. You're either in meditative equipoise on emptiness, direct realization of emptiness, where you see ultimate truth, or you're not, right? When you're not in meditative direct realization of emptiness, you are apprehending conventional truth. only when you're in meditative equipoise on emptiness are you realizing the ultimate truth. So the bodhisattvas, say for instance, seeing things, relative truths, conventional truths, and maybe worried that some delusion might be rising, they immediately enter into meditation on emptiness on the seventh ground and above, and then immediately exit that in one instant, one instant going in, one instant going out. Whereas in the lower grounds, they can't do that. If they wanted to, if they have some problem with conventional reality and they want to counter that with realization of emptiness, they have to sit down, put some effort. Might not take a long time. They enter into meditation on emptiness, and then they exit that and they interact again with the conventional world. Mikhail.
Yes, so we're trying to understand why bodhisattvas on the seventh ground outshined the others by way of their intelligence.
Right.
And this is the correct explanation, that this question of time to enter or go out from meditation. Yeah.
Right. Well, we would say it's the correct. That is, followers of Lama Tsongkhapa, followers who read Chandrakirti in this way, and read Nagarjuna in this way, and read the Dashabhumika Sutra in the Sutra of the 10 Bhumis. When he explains the seventh Bhumi, he explains they have this ability to enter into the perfect endpoint. It's a direct realization of emptiness in one instant, and only one instant to go out. Generally, it's not so easy. It's like when I talk about the clear light nature of our mind before, I said one of the features is it's not viscous, right? Things can leave in an instant and arise and enter into your mind very quickly. Whereas before the seventh Bhumi, it's almost like to enter into the meditation on emptiness is almost like viscosity. Do you know what I mean by viscosity? Maybe that's the term. Anna, do you know what viscosity means? So, like, say, when you have oil for your car, in the summer, you have what do you have? Less viscous or more viscous oil in the summer?
Less.
More, actually.
More. You have thicker oil, it's more viscous because the heat makes it, the heat of the engine in the summer makes it less viscous. In the winter, you want thinner oil, right? Less viscous oil, Stephen? Are you the one who said that?
Yeah, it was me, George. Paul.
Oh, Paul. So say, for instance, sorry, I thought it was Stephen saying. So like difference between water and molasses. If you stick a pen or a pin or your fork in the water, you take it out, there's no drag, right? If you stick it into molasses or honey, you pull it out, it sort of, it sticks a little bit. That's called, it's viscous, okay? So before the seventh Bhumi, to enter into that meditation, direct realization of emptiness, a little more difficult. It's almost like, trying to go into the oil or into the honey, it doesn't go in immediately. On the seventh ground, it's almost like your mind is like water. You can go in an instant and come out in an instant.
And
Making sense?
Yeah, just to be sure, but the whole paragraph before is about the signlessness. That's not correct, according to Tsongkhapa.
According to Tsongkhapa, that's Jayananda's explanation, which I mentioned. Dilgo Khyentse, Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche in his oral commentary almost was mirroring that, because many Tibetan lamas, because there are no other Sanskrit commentaries of Chandrakirti. Of course, Chandrakirti wrote his own commentary, but about what Chandrakirti said, there's no other Sanskrit commentary. They take Jayananda as, the best source. So Lama Tsongkhapa, and as he says, we'll see here why he's saying that is because his own guru, Rendawa. Snehi, do you know who Rendawa was?
He was a great Sakya teacher, and he was Lama Tsongkhapa's teacher in Madhyamaka.
Right. So he refers to Rendawa here. So he says, where are we now? So this is not possible on the lower grounds, entering into perfect cessation, into that meditative direct realization of emptiness and exiting in it every moment. This is not possible on the lower grounds. This is what my precious teacher says. And so when he says my precious teacher, that note 140 in your book there refers to Rendawa. What was it? Rendawa, Lodro, something, I can't remember. Rendawa was the Lama who wrote the mantra that we usually call Mixema, right? Mixe, Migme Sewe, Te Chen Chen Reze, Dime, Kempe, Wangpo, Jampeang. He wrote it as a praise to Tsongkhapa. And then Tsongkhapa changed the line so that it was, oh, wait. Rendawa, Lama Tsongkhapa wrote it as a praise to Rendawa, and Rendawa changed the line so that it was referring to Tsongkhapa. So that's the one that we have now, Migme Sewe Terchen Rezi, was actually composed by Rendawa. So they were very close. Sometimes Rendawa was the teacher of Tsongkhapa at the beginning. Later, when Tsongkhapa's intelligence and wisdom and accomplishments became so manifest, Rendawa took teachings from Tsongkhapa. So they were in that kind of situation where they were mutually guru and disciple. A little bit like the Dalai Lama and Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche and some of these other great lamas. When the Dalai Lama was giving empowerments, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche was in the audience, disciple. And then when Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche was giving high empowerments, the Dalai Lama would be sitting on the floor taking empowerments from him, sort of like mutually student and disciple. Very, very high lamas having that kind of situation. So what did we say here? On the path where engaged in such a... This is not possible on the lower grounds. This is what my precious teacher says. And it is an excellent explanation. So as Snehi mentioned, Rendawa was particularly Lama Tsongkhapa's teacher at the beginning about Madhyamaka, but later Lama Tsongkhapa even changed some of the teachings through his own analysis, revised what Rendawa had taught him. So Lama Tsongkhapa didn't say that everything that Rendawa said was right, but in this point, he said it's an excellent explanation. And it's verified by the Ten Bhumi Sutra. On the seventh ground, the Bodhisattva is able to enter into the meditative equipoise on emptiness, perfect endpoint, in one instant, and then arise from that in one instant. On the paths where one engages suchness by means of imagination, remember I talked about this before, you could say the paths of belief, that means on the path of accumulation and path of preparation, you don't have a direct realization of emptiness. You don't have a direct realization of suchness. You are engaging with suchness by belief or by imagination. Doesn't mean it's just like whatever you want to imagine. It means that you are still realizing it by means of a mental image. You have a conceptual realization of it. On the paths where one engages suchness by means of imagination, path of accumulation and preparation, given that such a meditative concentration on emptiness, one's mind and suchness have not fused into a single taste, it is not difficult to enter and rise out of such meditative states within short moments. So on the path of accumulation and preparation, maybe more on the path of preparation, because your mind has not, when you enter into meditative equipoise on emptiness, it's a conceptual realization, right? Because your mind has not eliminated the duality of subject and object, that is, it's as though you are the observer observing emptiness. Your mind has not fused with emptiness as one entity. You don't have a direct realization of that. It's easy to at that point, on the path of the preparation, the path of the, what is it called, the engaging suchness by means of imagination. You are able to do that quite quickly because your mind is not fused with emptiness. You know, like when we talk about the realization of emptiness, the direct realization of emptiness, it's as though your mind and the object emptiness are of one taste, or they have fused, like if you were to pour some milk in water, it becomes all, you know, after some instance, you maybe stir it up first, or maybe your coffee, okay, you pour in the cream. Once you stir it up, you can't differentiate any longer the cream from the coffee, right? You can't differentiate the milk, that the couple of drops of milk that you dropped into the water once you stirred it up. They become of one taste, of one, you know, they seem to be one thing. So when you have a direct realization of emptiness, your mind and emptiness are not like subject and object separated. They've become of one taste. Making sense? Sheila, what do you think? That's what we do in America, right? Isn't that some American mudra? Like, kinda. Okay. On the path where one engages suchness by means of imagination, given that in such a meditative concentration on emptiness, it's still a meditative concentration, right? But it's not, you know, because you have a union, let's say on the path of preparation, you have a union of tranquil abiding and penetrative insight, meditating on emptiness, one pointedly, perfect concentration, but your mind is not fused with the object. On the path where one engages suchness by means of imagination, given that in such a meditative concentration on emptiness, one's mind and suchness have not fused into a single taste, it is not difficult to enter into and rise out of such meditative states within short moments. So it's relatively easy there, you know, to have a conceptual realization of emptiness. So you're looking at something and you're having a problem and you want to meditate on emptiness to overcome some delusion that might be perking up. You can enter into that conceptual understanding of emptiness very quickly. Meditative equipoise, not just a remembering of it, but meditative equipoise on that, because your mind doesn't have to fuse with emptiness there. It's not a direct realization. But on the Arya stage, when one's mind has fused with suchness like water poured into water, so water poured into milk, or milk poured into water, or water poured into water. It's like you have a glass of water, and someone says, "Oh, this water I got from Jennifer. It's from, where was it from, Jennifer?
From Lourdes.
From Lourdes." So if I drop a drop of that in my water bowl to bless the water or something like that, after an instant, you can't differentiate, you know, where is Jennifer's water? Where's the other water? They become mixed together of one taste. Okay. It is not difficult to enter into and rise out of such meditative states within short moments because it's not a direct realization. But on the Arya stage, when one's mind has fused with suchness like water poured into water, this mode of entering into and arising out of emptiness within a short moment is extremely difficult. That's the That's Rendawa's explanation to Lama Tsongkhapa. Lama Tsongkhapa thought this is right because it's verified by the Sutra of the 10 Bhumis on the 7th stage. It says this is what the Bodhisattva has the ability to do, to enter into that endpoint, that perfect limit of reality in one instant and arise out of it. Making sense? Diana, how are you doing? I didn't ask you today. You okay? Anna, are you in a school room? What is that over your right shoulder? Is that a blackboard with?
So in my house, I decided it would be a good idea to have a blackboard so I can write down my aspirations.
Oh, nice. Okay. Okay.
It's like a little prayer room.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. So Lama Tsongkhapa continues. I just read a little bit more. You might be wondering, or as Jeffrey says, objection. So it says someone might think there's like a qualm, right? You might be wondering, why are we discussing how on the 7th ground Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas are outshone through their intelligence when we're actually in the context of description of the qualities of the 1st ground? We're just talking about the 1st ground, right? Why are we talking about the 7th ground? This is a waste of time. Reply or answer. The fault of conflating contexts, mixing up contexts, does not apply. The presentations in this text on the 1st ground and so forth are based on the 1st ground and so on and so forth are based on the 10 ground sutra, the Dashibhumika. And that sutra clarifies that one abiding on the 1st ground outshines Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas through his conventional awakening mind and not through his ultimate awakening mind. It actually says that on the 1st ground. Not through ultimate awakening mind, not through his intelligence. Then to help dispel the qualm, which would be, well then, from what ground does the Bodhisattva outshine the others through his realization, through her realization? It explains that he would outshine the others through their realization starting from the 7th ground on up. This statement from the sutra is presented here in Chandrakirti's text as well. So you should know that the context is perfectly appropriate. Don't carp. Is that the right term? If you carp, that means you complain about something. Don't complain. Why you're talking about the 7th ground here? It's appropriate because in the explanation of the 1st ground in the Dashabhumika, it says he doesn't excel them by means of intelligence. Then when you get to the 7th, it does. Okay, what do you think? Making sense? Anyone have a question? Doris.
Thank you, Venerable. My dyslexia kicks in.
Oh, I bet.
I'm confused. At first it says that the Bodhisattva enters into and it can arise out of the sensation, but that can't be done on the grounds before the
7th
ground of path of seeing. But then when you go to the end of that paragraph, it says that after it's water poured into water, this mode of entering into is more difficult.
Right. So I misspoke. So you're talking about the differentiation between before the path of seeing, when you can enter into meditative equipoise on emptiness fairly quickly, as opposed to on the 1st bhumi when you can't enter into that in one instant. The reason being because on the 1st bhumi, you no longer have a conceptual understanding of emptiness where the subject, your mind, seems distinct from the object emptiness. So you can kind of enter into that and leave that quite quickly. But on the path of on the path of accumulation, on the path of preparation, when they seem to be separate, you can enter into that and leave that quite quickly. But on the path of seeing, when there's no longer that duality of subject and object, they are fused. To enter into that is quite difficult in one instant.
That makes sense to me. But prior to that,
Yeah.
it sounded like you were saying it was easier once you become an Arya and have that water to water. And that's
No.
where we're confused.
If I said that, I misspoke. On the path of, let's say, on the path of preparation, let's say, just before you are realizing it directly on the path of seeing. Well, maybe it could be a long time, maybe even thousands of lifetimes, you're meditating on emptiness. You can enter into a meditative equipoise on emptiness, conceptual realization of emptiness quite quickly, not necessarily in one instant, but quite quickly. If you're dealing with worldly concerns and you need to revivify, to suppress delusions that might be coming up by understanding emptiness, you can enter into that conceptual realization of emptiness relatively quickly because the mind has not fused with emptiness. But on the path of seeing, you can still have conceptual realization of emptiness on the path of seeing and above. That's okay. But when you're talking about the meditative direct realization of emptiness, because in the direct realization of emptiness, the mind and emptiness seem to be one entity. There's no differentiation. I am realizing emptiness. They're fused like water poured into water. So that to enter into that and then to extricate yourself from that and awaken again, open your eyes and see things, can't be done in one thought instant until you reach the seventh ground, when because of the power of your concentration and wisdom, accumulation of merit, other factors, at that point, you're able to enter into that and exit that in one instant. So you could still be the bodhisattva on the first 6 bhumis, could still enter into a conceptual realization of emptiness very quickly and exit that. But if they wanted to have a direct realization of emptiness, it couldn't be entered into and exited in one thought instant. I lost where, I'm trying to see where you are. Oh, there you are. Does it make sense?
It does. I maybe I just heard it wrong that you said it was easier at that point. I'll have to go back and look at it again, or
Yeah.
not look at it, but
Listen to
listen and read.
Okay.
Thank you, Venerable.
Yeah. Sister Snehi.
Thank you, Venerable George. I'm still, mulling over your conversation with Suvanj, and my mind is kind of stuck at this thought where I think you said that at the 8th stage, the Shravakas and Pratyekabuddhas get rid of self-cherishing completely. That's all gone. But they still in the continuum have, no empathy for others, and so still want.
It's not that they have no empathy, but it's sort of like a lack of, total empathy. They still have the wish to achieve liberation for themselves alone. So
Right.
this particular point about where self-cherishing is eliminated is the object of a lot of debate. It's not very clear from scriptures. One of the great Tibetan lamas who passed away some years ago, Losang Gyatso, who was the abbot of the debating school in Dharamsala, Senilapta, he wrote a book on bodhicitta, and one of the special things that he dove into was, when self-cherishing thought is actually, what is self-cherishing attitude? You can't call it a thought. Rang Chenzen Gi Lo. Lo means mind or awareness, mati. So what is it actually? Is it an imprint? Is it a mind? Is it a seed? When is it abandoned? And his conclusion, always based on, scriptural references, was that even the hearers and solitary realizers, arhats, have abandoned Rangchen Zinagilo, this self-cherishing attitude, but the consequence of having had self-cherishing attitude up until that time when they're an arhat, they still have that wish to escape from cyclic existence for themselves alone. So they've achieved arhatship. They still have a physical body. They're going to die soon. So they're not thinking, oh, I will take rebirth again in order to benefit sentient beings because I'd be leaving them behind. The urge for them is just to get out of here as soon as possible. So this is a little bit of contentious point, whether they have self-cherishing thought or they don't. Losang Gyatso's conclusion was that they don't have self-cherishing thought, but they still have the remnant of that, the wish to escape from cyclic existence for themselves alone. And that impels them to, I'm going to die and go into nirvana. I'm leaving this place.
I think what puzzles me is that, at the stage where if we accept that you get rid of all the self-cherishing thought and its seeds, then, self-cherishing is only with respect to other. So if there's no, if you don't have a self-cherishing, there is no other cherishing, So it's like, I find it very puzzling that with that mental state, there can still be an undercurrent of, I want to continue and get out of here.
Well, even bodhisattvas recognize I am one thing and you are something else, right? It's not as though there's no different, you're just going around and you don't recognize your own body. You still have a conception of yourself and so forth, right?
Yes, but at that stage of the 8, where you have, you're an arhat, direct realization of emptiness, you've burnt all the seeds, no self-cherishing, then all these concepts are only relative. And when they're all gone, I don't know how bodhisattvas walk around and relate to self and other, knowing that they're not like, concrete entities. Anyway, I will think about it, but
it's worth thinking about. So what I've presented here, think about when we get up into the 6th chapter and the 6th bhumi, there's a lot of explanation of how there's a difference between how the bodhisattvas perceive conventional realities and how the arhats, the Hinayana arhats, perceive conventional realities. So we'll come to that. It'll come up again. Sean.
I wanted to ask, so you mentioned in this part where you were talking about Tsongkhapa's teacher, and you made the comment that Tsongkhapa's realizations became manifest in such a fashion that he became the teacher instead of the student.
Well, at a certain point, at the beginning, Lama Tsongkhapa went to Rendawa to study Madhyamaka. Maybe very soon afterwards, there were things that Lama Tsongkhapa had already accomplished and studied more than Rendawa, and that he would give teachings to Rendawa. It didn't necessarily mean a long time afterwards, but they were both recognized as great scholars and practitioners. Usually we say Kedrup. There's one Lama, one of the disciples of Lama Tsongkhapa called Kedrup Rinpoche. Kedrup. K means learned, Drup means accomplished, sort of like one is talking about, the study versus practice. So someone is both well-studied, well-learned, and someone who is a practitioner. So they were both adepts like that. They were both well-read, scholarly, and they were both practitioners. So they were well above their own disciples. They had their own circles of disciples. But Lama Tsongkhapa went to Rendawa to study Madhyamaka because he had not, Rendawa had some renown as being very, very learned in Madhyamaka. So Lama Tsongkhapa studied with him. And then later when Lama Tsongkhapa's, well, maybe this is what you're referring to, when Lama Tsongkhapa's realizations of Madhyamaka were more established, he may have given explanations to Rendawa and even criticized some of Rendawa's conclusions in Rendawa's famous commentary. Rendawa also wrote a commentary, because he was Tibetan, right? Rendawa wrote a commentary to Madhyamaka Avatara that the Sakya students still study today. And most of, go on.
Well, I guess my question though was, so when you're saying this manifestation of his realizations, that's not some outward sign that people can observe. It's just his own deeper understanding of Madhyamaka.
Yeah. So when his understanding of Madhyamaka became clear to him, and because when he taught and debated with others, it became clear to others that he understood well, he became maybe sort of like the, an alternative to Rendawa. So others would still go to Rendawa while he was alive. I think Rendawa died. I'm not sure when he died. I think he died before, he was older than Lama Tsongkhapa. He died before Lama Tsongkhapa. So Lama Tsongkhapa then became for many, the authority, whereas there were Sakyas and Kargyus and Nyingmas who didn't accept what Lama Tsongkhapa said.
But I guess I'm wanting to know, is there an example of what is meant by this manifestation of
That was
realization?
my terminology. It's not written down somewhere.
Well, I know, but
when he had,
like how would I ever know if I've achieved the correct view or not?
how
Like,
would
is
you
there
know?
some-
Okay.
Yeah, is there some
So
kind of
say, for instance, if you
outward
were,
sign?
well, like sometimes someone would say, George, I meditated over the weekend, and last week I knew I was just an ordinary person, but now, am I enlightened? Maybe I had some experience, out of body experience. Maybe I'm enlightened. It's not like that. There's a sequence that takes place over maybe 3 countless eons, or maybe if you're talking about Tantra and other things, that relatively where you are. It's not as like, am I a bodhisattva or not? Have I realized emptiness or not? You can, if you're a beginner and you have a lot of imagination and a lot of ego, you might think that you have realizations, but generally one would debate with others. One has one's own teachers that would observe you and critique your understanding and so forth. Lama Tsongkhapa had direct communication with Manjushri. So Manjushri could tell him, yeah, you've got it right, and so forth. Or that's not exactly right. This is the way to think about it. So when a meditator, say a bodhisattva, has they're thinking about their own understanding, generally they would know where they are. They would know whether they're on the path of accumulation or path of preparation, because there's certain demarcations that indicate you've entered into a particular level. Okay, let me leave it at that. And Jennifer has one last question.
Thank you. I had 2, but happy to just ask one. And I think I missed the answer, but basically, if a bodhisattva is equivalent to a Hinayana arhat at the 8th
Bodhisattva means an 8th level, 8th ground bodhisattva, right? Not bodhisattva, but go on.
Oh, okay. Well, yes. Let's say an 8th ground bodhisattva is equivalent to a Hinayana arhat. Why is it that at the seventh ground, due to intelligence, they outshine the?
Because they have the ability to do something that the Hinayana Arhat cannot do. They can enter into direct realization of emptiness in one instant and exit that meditative direct realization of emptiness in one instant. So
Yes.
they outshine them. Otherwise, they all have realizing emptiness, the same emptiness, the same kind of realization. So, they don't outshine the solitary realizers, in that the solitary realizers or hearers' realization of emptiness is inferior. Only, if you were to accept the Spatantrika point of view, which I think you were saying before, if you were to accept the Spatantrika point of view that the hearers and solitary realizer arhats have reached their nirvana by realizing the lack of a self-supporting, substantially existent person, if that was real, if they really achieved nirvana and they were real arhats, that would be contradictory to all of our understandings here. So it's set, and we will see this more, like in the next section where it says the concluding implications of these statements, that the Hinayana arhats have realized emptiness. And then there's a whole section coming here that Lama Tsongkhapa elaborates on why the Hinayana Aryas and arhats have definitely realized emptiness, not just the lack of self-supporting, substantially existent person and so forth.
Yes, thank you. I think I'm just getting tripped up on the terminology because I equate intelligence with degree of how much obstacles to liberation that you've accomplished, which is why I'm curious why the seventh ground bodhisattva would outshine a Shravaka.
Yeah. So when we talk about intelligence, say two people may have, maybe two chess players may have a certain kind of level of understanding, but one has other abilities that is due to and as a result of their intelligence, they can maybe make the moves more quickly or something like that. That's what's being.
Thank you. That was the question. Thank you so much.
Okay. So update. Next week, no class, because I have an operation this coming Wednesday. As I said last time, there's anesthesia and I'd be even more loopy than I'm usually. And then we decided to take the next week off also. So we're going to have the next two classes will be free. That means through Thanksgiving weekend. So you have this next weekend as well before Thanksgiving. The weekend after that is Thanksgiving weekend. I think Thanksgiving is Thursday, so we won't have class on Saturday then either. So we'll start Snehi, December 3rd, is it? 3rd, 10th, and 17th. 17th. So we'll have 3 in December. Is that right? So just 3 more classes this year. And then we're going to take a little break in January also so that you can recoup, you can clean the Christmas tree and, take the eggnog off the walls. What was it, the thing about Trump throwing the tomato sauce at the walls or something? Ketchup. You can take the ketchup off the walls. So we're thinking to start when in January, Snehi?
January 14th.
January 14th. Okay, so this is still work in progress. So at any rate, we'll just have 3 more classes this year, starting the week after Thanksgiving, not the weekend of Thanksgiving. You'll have off the next 2 weeks, and then we'll have 3 classes in December. Then we'll start in the middle of January. So get a chance to study and think and contemplate and so forth. Read ahead, hopefully.
And could I just add, so Sheila, thank you for posting the 16 Arhats Puja. We're having it tomorrow, led by Venerable Rabina at 2:30 Eastern Time, 11:30 Pacific, 8:30 Central European time for Venerable George. So for anyone available, it will be amazing to especially wish Venerable George much health in light of his surgery and to create the causes to continue receiving teachings. May that be so. And also the website shows various benefits to ourselves when we make offerings to the 16 arhats, such as perfect inner and outer conditions, able to practice pure morality. So hope everyone can register and join us.
Right. They're actually called the 16 elders, Stivira. But people, because they were all arhats, they refer to them as the 16 arhats, but they're called the 16 Naten in Tibetan, or Stiviras, elders. Ida, did you have your finger up?
This question is for Sheila. Would the link that we're using now work for the December classes, or do we have to re-register?
No, that link will work till the end of December.
Okay, thank
And
you.
when we start the next module, there'll be a new link.
Okay, in January we'll
January, in the middle of January.
Okay, so Snehi, would you like to put up the dedication prayers? Due to these virtues, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings, or set all living beings without exception into that very state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Then for prayer for Lama Zopa's long life, you who uphold the Muni's moral code, serving as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, masterfully accomplishing magnificent prayers, honoring the triple gem, savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And to all our gurus, the Dalai Lamas, all of your other teachers, you who are eyes for me to view all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateway for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by love, all illuminating spiritual friends. Implication being, please live a long and stable life. So gone over quite a bit, so won't do more elaborate dedication today. Please be well, have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in December.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thanks all. Take care.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you. Thank you, Venerable.
Venerable George.
Bye,
Thank you,
Rachel.
Venerable. Well,
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Sunil.
thank you, Sheila.